Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey, c'est moi. It is September 13th, and here we are, yet again. Another hour of who knows what. God knows I don't. You know, it's not like I come in here aware of what I'm going to start with or what it'll end with or whether I'll be in a good mood or not. I have no idea. I definitely wasn't yesterday, I'll tell you. I got a text from a friend saying, geez, what? Man, were you misanthropic yesterday? It's hard not to be misanthropic, I think, sometimes. Anyway, I'll try to be a little more upbeat today, but in fact, everything I've sort of culled from the news that I do have here to potentially talk about is, you know, nothing's funny. Nothing's lighthearted. If anyone knows anything going on that is funny and lighthearted, and I must admit, I don't find a lot of things funny that I might have a few years ago when they didn't seem so consequential, at any rate. Do you think the guys at like CNN and are upset that Florence has decided just to be a Category 2 and is slowing down and is not this... She definitely has lost a lot of pizzazz, you know? And when news focuses on something that they figure is just going to be wow, and it sort of already is disappointing them. I swear I am not being, I'm not kidding. There are producers and reporters who are not happy that this looks like it isn't going to be as horrific as it might have been. We do think our phones are in full operating order today, by the way, so if you want to give us a call, we do think, unlike yesterday, you'll be able to hear me, and we'll be able to actually engage in a conversation. I don't know. As I said yesterday, I wish this thing would just happen. I hate when news gets in a 24/7 coverage of the approaching hurricane, which can go on for a week, and then the hurricane, which can go on for, 48 hours, and then the aftermath of the hurricane. So for the next, I just don't understand why news like CNN and the others can't do more of what a newspaper used to do, which is not have the entire thing be about one story. I mean, these days, it's, Trump 24/7, unless you get something like Florence 24/7, and then maybe you let the two, live together. But as I said yesterday, there's so many stories that we should, as citizens, be aware of that we are not being informed about because of this singular kind of focus that cable news has, and to a lesser extent, broadcast news. I do want to say this, though, that I have all my memories are vague. I have a vague memory of years ago when I didn't remember which state it was, but it was a southern coastal state run by Republicans, and they passed a bill, which was happily signed by the Republican governor, that sort of, as I remember it, it made talking about the oceans rising and the impact on the coastline rising almost a almost a crime. I'm not kidding. It was I remember we laughed a lot about it. Now since then, not much has changed. The law, it turns out, I am reminded by a piece I read today, that is from 2012, and the state happened to be North Carolina, which is now hunkering down for the impact of Florence, however severe that will be. And there was a law passed in North Carolina in 2012 that initially was so outrageous that, I mean, it really was like, you'll be imprisoned if you mention the word global warming or something. I mean, if you're in any governmental position. I'm exaggerating only slightly. They managed, even in the Republican legislature, because of ridicule coming at them from so many quarters, to ameliorate some of the more outrageous provisions in this bill. But as it did pass, and frankly is still in effect in North Carolina, it did effectively, the law, order state agencies and any local government and agencies in North Carolina that have coastline, which is a whole bunch of them, that they are not to have policies in place that are based on an acceleration of the rise of sea levels in the coming years. In other words, any policies having to do with coastlines, generally speaking, that would be development stuff. It was against the law to have those policies based on scientific models that showed the rise of ocean levels as accelerating. In other words, they were not to take into effect the latest, consideration, the latest science on the impact of the warming of the oceans on their coastal development policies. And, of course, the reason for an absurd law like that, an absolutely insane, self-destructive law like that, is that the developers won, and so there was nothing standing in their way to continue to build up the coastline of North Carolina. There was nothing saying, you can't build there. That's going to be underwater in 20 years. We're not letting you build there, okay? So the North Carolina coast that exists now and is hunkered down is much more populated, has many, many more structures than it did just 6 years ago when that idiot law was passed. The coastal population of North Carolina have almost, I think it's doubled in the last 20 years, with that acceleration not having any slowdown. So since it's become known to any sentient being, that would take most Republicans out of the mix, any sentient being, that our coasts are going to be eroding, that the ocean is, not might, is going to be coming in and taking over land. These idiots up and down the coast have just been whistling past the graveyard and building apartments, big McMansions, who knows what. When if we had sane, responsible governance in this country, nothing would have been built there on the coast. Nothing anymore. Can you imagine? So here this destructive storm is approaching. And it's approaching a coastline that is more dense with buildings, more dense with human population than it was 6 years ago, even though anyone who isn't dense knows that that's insane. And the thing is, North Carolina is not alone in this kind of idiocy. So many of those southern coastal states are run by Republican governors, Republican legislatures. I give you Rick Scott, Governor Rick Scott of Florida, and Florida has a similar kind of law. Under Rick Scott, Florida didn't criminalize, discouraged the use of terms like climate change and global warming in any official communications put out by governmental agencies. Now, actually, this is the same kind of thing that the Environmental Protection Agency under Scott Pruitt was doing as well. I assume that under his successor, the same kind of crap is going on. After all, we have a president who has called climate change a hoax. And I noted yesterday that as this storm approaches, brought on by the warming of the oceans, the Atlantic turning into a kind of warm bathtub, that Trump's administration is attempting to roll back regulations that prevented the release of a lot of methane into the air by power plants. They're going to roll that back and let the power plants spew as much methane as they want. By the way, it turns out that North Carolina, before the Republicans took over, was actually in the forefront of coastal climate science studies, and were considered the state to watch about how they were reasonably dealing with this future challenge. And then the Republicans came in, and the official policy was to ignore scientific data and to build up the coastal areas, which are now potentially going to suffer a lot of destruction. Okay, we have a caller. Let's see if this works. Hello, caller. Hello, caller. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. It sounds like a shortwave radio. Caller, please. So it's actually worse than it was yesterday. Hang on.
Hello.
Hello. Where are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Well, that's a step up, but we can barely hear you. What's up? I mean, we can barely hear you. I don't know if... go ahead anyway.
I was going to say that I'm so over the wildfires and the hurricanes. Not that I'm so serious for the people who got injured or killed or something, but why don't I go build my house next to a volcano? Duh. So that's all I got to say. Or let me invade a country that's not bothered us, and then people get killed. Duh. stupid shit like that, it just aggravates you.
Okay, well,
what amazes me?
Yeah.
Huh? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, and I can hear you, but it's not great. I totally agree with you, not surprisingly.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the taxpayers should continue to, tolerate the bleeding of money that allows people to live, in areas that are prone to these disasters. Fine, if you want to, do it at your own risk, but don't expect the government through flood insurance to bail you out anymore. We just keep letting people rebuild in places that are only going to get flooded again the next year.
And another thing, this Kavanaugh, could you imagine if he gets in there and he tries, and they roll back the abortion thing? Could you imagine the chaos in this country trying to enforce that abortion? It would go back the way it was, but it would be so. Which Trump could have ICE go after the women, or watch them after they had sex. What the fuck's wrong with these people? I don't even get any of this shit. Your body's right to do with your body what you want is your own business.
Can you imagine? If there were, let me just say that if men were subject to governmental control of their bodies, imagine that, because you guys aren't.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
See, I believe in Dr. Kevorkian, and a lot of people get mad at me, but I think the right to die should be your right. If you want to take your life, you take it. That's how I feel about it. I've always felt that way. If you're sick and you don't want to be treated and you want to just die, you should be able to go to a person who'll give you something and you're done. It's your right. It's not the government to tell you what to do with your body.
Well, of course not. And government, the idea that suicide is somehow criminal doesn't come from secular government. It comes from religion.
Yeah, religion.
That's what it's based on, and I thought religion wasn't supposed to, come. But the abortion thing is religiously based.
Anything.
Yeah, it is people's religious beliefs infecting our supposedly secular government. And make no mistake about it, abortion is in great danger. Great danger. If Kavanaugh gets on, kiss it goodbye. Welcome to the 30s, 40s, and 50s again. Back we go, girls. Okay, I thank you. I appreciate your call. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah, that's just not right. Terrible bug. Unhappy I am. I hope you were able to hear him, but the audio is horrific. Son of a bitch. Anyway, I really feel that way. Why should we keep letting people, and it is a lot on both coasts. It's not just, in that regard, Republican policies. In California, where you have all these rich liberals living on hilltops over the ocean that are going to, just disappear into it through erosion of the base and also prone to mudslides. And I don't know. I don't get it. I really don't. Rather annoying. Some stories just don't go away. They just keep, and the stories of, I'm sorry guys, but men's bad behavior. I just want to pick up again on this Les Moonves thing at CBS, and also the knowledge that yesterday CBS fired another big executive there, the producer of 60 Minutes. Now that forever, since the show's inception in 1822, had been a guy named Don Hewitt, but he finally stepped down. And the man who took his place, Jeff Fager, had been with the show also for a very, very long time, well-liked, blah, 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 blah. Now he's gone. And he did not do anything anywhere near as egregious as what Les Moonves did. But the CBS board now is so skittish, and because they totally mishandled the accusations against Moonves, that then the next time an accusation comes in, they perhaps jump the gun. I don't know. Fager sent his crime was sending essentially a threatening a job to a reporter who was working on these kinds of stories, allegations of sexual harassment at CBS, and a woman, and he was essentially saying to her, "Hey, baby, back off because I can destroy you." Now, I suppose that should be something that a manager is not allowed to do. But up against everything becomes relative in this day and age. So there are people at 60 Minutes who are very unhappy with his firing, apparently. Fager, part of his text said this: "Be careful," he said to this woman. "There are people who lost their jobs trying to harm me. And if you pass on these damaging claims without your own reporting to back them up, that will become a serious problem." Yeah, that's a threat. What's with these people? These are and let's think about for a minute. Now that we know that you have so many men in entertainment and journalism who clearly abuse their power, especially as we're learning as it applies to any women who are in their purview. And so, do you think that has any, or would have in the past and the present, have any impact at all on what stories they choose to cover, what stories they think are important, the way that they treat women? Does that infect their news judgment? You betcha it does. And as I said to the caller, we're totally used to the idea of men in legislative bodies, in corporate situations, in journalism and entertainment, essentially feeling they own women's bodies and acting that way. And I don't know how long it would take to get rid of that strain of bad human behavior. I would argue that probably it's impossible. We can try, as we do, legislating things, but this is inbred, it's endemic, it's epidemic, it is socially in the water we drink and the air we breathe. So, and it's in it gets succor in our religious training as well. God, of course, is the Father. Women are relegated to a subservient position. So a guy like Fager at 60 Minutes, he's the guy who brought in Charlie Rose. And he was lauded as just brilliant bringing in Charlie Rose to co-host the CBS Morning News. And we all know what happened to Charlie Rose. How odd that you have Les Moonves, Fager, Charlie Rose. These are the guys at the top of the sterling network, CBS, Black Rock. And every one of them, Fager being the least egregious, doesn't have a clue how to behave when it comes to women. It sure doesn't get in their way in terms of their meteoric rises. God knows how many women are damaged in their wake. And how many men we're really talking about here. The New York Times today has they got some sources inside the boardroom at CBS. And it has a big article now describing the CBS Board of Directors' reaction to the initial charges against Les Moonves. That happened in late July. And an emergency board meeting was called. It was on conference call because these guys are all over. And guys is the operative word, since most boards of directors are overwhelmingly white males. And the New York Times article quotes various board members responding to what they now know are charges that are going to be coming out against this guy who they employ and who has been very successful in his job and made their shareholders very happy, lots of money. And then they're told they're a bunch of women. They're coming out, and they're saying he did this and he did that. One of the members of the board of directors is a guy named Arnold Copelson. He actually was the producer of Platoon, the movie that won an Oscar. And he said this, according to a number of sources who were on that phone call. I don't care if 30 more women come forward and allege this kind of stuff. Les is our leader, and it wouldn't change my opinion of him. So, this is what happens when a number of women speak out against a powerful man, and the other powerful men who oversee the accused man's employment flat out feel perfectly comfortable saying, I don't care if 30 more women come forward. I have to tell you, as a woman, as an old woman now, I'd like to think that as I grew old, I'd become less angry. Supposedly, and I was sort of feeling like that, you pick your battles, you understand. And all this stuff, all this loss of innocence news that is overwhelming us, it's very hard not to be angry. Not in some ways, if you're a woman of a certain age whose career was impacted by this kind of shit, to become bitter, to feel that the impact that certain men have had on your career is an outrage, even if at the time it was just, well, that's just the way it is. Another member of the CBS board, you may remember, he was the defense secretary under Clinton's presidency, And it was unusual because he was a former Republican congressman, but Clinton chose him as his defense secretary. His name was William Cohen. I always thought he seemed like a really reasonable kind of a guy. Here's the quote from him as a member of the CBS board of directors when these women first came forward. "We are going to stay in this meeting until midnight if we need to, until we get an agreement that we stand 100% behind our CEO, and there will be no change in his status." So what turned the board around? You know what turned the board around? Not the allegations of any woman. Not even the facts of these allegations. Right. Even if they were to be proven. What Les Moonves did to any woman is not what turned the CBS board around. It's that they found out that Moonves was essentially trying to pay off, first, one of the women, after he had absolutely denied to them any of these allegations. And then they found out that without reporting back to them, he had been busily trying to find one of the women who was going to go public, trying to get her into a nice job at the network, if she would shut up. That's what took him down. Says here in the New York Times, when the board learned about this, even Moonves' staunchest backers were stunned. The evidence that he had misled them. Off with his head. So to all these powerful men on the board of CBS, the crime that Les Moonves got canned for was not assaulting a woman. And another woman over here, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, and a sixth. They're up to 12 now, I believe. No, it was not that. That was okay, as the one guy said. There could be 30 women could come forward. Doesn't change my... No. But you lied to me? That was the straw that broke the camel's back. They felt, these guys all of a sudden felt abused. He had abused their trust in him. And that was the end of him. And I had mentioned yesterday that he's still going to walk away with supposedly $120 million or something. Apparently he's not. See, the CBS board all of a sudden is scared. They're running scared, and they are angry now. So even though when they were stunned that he had betrayed them, they initially said, "Oh, I can't believe this. This is horrible." But we'll still give him about $90 million. They decided they'd still give him half of what he would normally get. His severance would be $180 million, I guess contractually. They thought they'd give him $90 million anyway. But then they found out that there were actually more women. And he, in fact, had lied to them yet again. And that's when they said, we're not even giving him the $90 million. Here's from the New York Times. Given Mr. Moonvis's lack of candor, board members concluded that he could be terminated for cause, which means he ain't getting the money. And then, and of course, a public relations flourish. They decided to take $20 million of that money and instead give it to the hashtag #MeToo movement, which I don't understand because I don't understand who you give it to with that. So, Moonves is getting nothing, not because he assaulted women, but because he lied to the boys. I'm so sick of it all. Yeah. Milton, I know. Our liar in chief is now saying he doesn't think 3,000 people died in Puerto Rico. He's saying they died of old age. And you see what Eric said the other day? I mean, this stuff doesn't even really make the bigger news. You learn of it if you're trolling around on Fox News. Eric Trump was being interviewed, and he said about Woodward's book something to the effect of, that he was just doing it for the money and all these lies. There's all a bunch of unsubstantiated lies, but he'll make he said something, more shekels is what he said, Eric Trump said. But he'll get more shekels. Now, I got to tell you, that is just a bizarro anti-Semitic dog whistle thrown into this accusation that, he's just in it for the money. Why would you say shekel? Shekel is the currency of Israel. Shekels are in the Bible. It has to do with Jewish money. So you hear shekels used a lot on neo-Nazi sites, on alt-right sites, on anti-Semitic sites. And so here is the president's son saying shekels. Now, what's odd about it, too, is, of course, Woodward is a wasp's wasp. He is not a Jew. He's not Jewish. So people would say, well, it doesn't make sense because he's not Jewish, so why did he say shekels? Well, he said shekels because it's a dog whistle. It's a dog whistle that somehow then makes it appear that, of course, the Jews, as you know, Jews, media, power, greed, blah, blah, blah. So, guys, I have to tell you, we are getting to a point where the, Republicans are engaging in such racist and anti-Semitic dog whistling with such consistency in ways that, the listener has to, your reaction is one of just total initial, what? Where did that come from? Like DeSantis, the guy running for governor of Florida, saying, You can't elect his opponent because he'll monkey things up. His opponent being black. Monkey things up is not even a phrase. You monkey around. But see, it doesn't matter. He's black. You have to get monkey in there. It's a racist dog whistle. Trump, Eric here, didn't even need Woodward to be a Jew to bring the Jews in. And as angry as I am about, women and what's happened to them in our past and in our present and obviously continuing, I am as fearful as my anger at that is about what I see happening in discourse in this country, that this stuff is now just out there, mainstream, from the White House, from the president, from the president's sons, from Republicans in office, seeking higher office, racist, anti-Semitic dog whistling. And as is well known, when they come for these usual marginalized groups, the blacks, the Jews, it never stops there. This is incipient white nationalism that is becoming impossible not to hear, see, smell almost on a daily basis. And always coming from the same sources, and those are sources that enable the Republican agenda. And I now can't tell them apart. I have not. Let me take a moment to note the passing of a long-time competitor of mine in local talk radio, and Mike Pintek, who held down the afternoon shift at KDKA for decades, and he and I frankly cannot ever remember meeting him personally. So, I think people assume that all of us talk show types know each other. I did not know Mike Pintek. I certainly might have mentioned him on occasion on my show. He might have mentioned me, and I'm sure those were not nice mentions. We were politically at opposite ends, but I want to note his passing. And the one thing about his history that always just blew me away was that he was the first reporter to report on the leak at 3 Mile Island. He was just a local, yokel, I think, radio reporter, I think he could have been TV. He did a little of both, sort of like me. And he was in that area where 3 Mile Island was, and he saw there was no steam coming out of the reactor, made a phone call. And obviously that became a huge story. And he essentially broke it. So that is always the thing. I remember when I first heard him telling that story, I was just blown away. Because I hadn't even known he'd been a reporter. I just thought he was just a loudmouth, but no, he was more than that. And I just want to note his passing. And man, I think too young. When they're dropping dead and there's younger than me, I can't take it. I take it personally. No, I'm sorry. That was awful. We have a call, apparently. Caller, go ahead, please.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Good morning, Lynn.
Morning.
Yeah, rather chagrined by the actions of many of my cohort, the cohort being white males in this society. And for example, and of course this didn't originate from an American, but they just horribly racist cartoon, that depicted Serena Williams as just a incredibly offensive, racial caricature, which was from an Australian cartoonist. But not only have his paper's editors and publishers defended it, but I occasionally check in on some right-wing sites and blogs just to as Chris Potter once said, get insight into people who have no good insight, as he said he did when he would listen to some conservative talk show hosts. And I mean, there are people who some are just blatantly racist. I mean, I don't think there's any denying that there are just some absolute, bigots who work for and are involved in the ostensibly, respectable mainstream of conservative thought. But there are others who simply would defend it and say, I don't see any racism in this. Why, it's just a typical exaggeration of a cartoonist, of an editorial cartoonist. It's just mind-blowing. And, I can't say that everybody is that self-deluded. I have to think on a certain level that they're engaging in make-believe. I really do.
Well, but we know, look,
make-believe.
We know now that they're engaged in make-believe because they just make up whatever realities they want. Reality is put aside, and they create their own. So it is really it's just frightening. I remember there was a New York Times Magazine piece during the George W. Bush administration in which I believe Karl Rove was quoted as sort of like laughing at some reporter's question and saying, you guys don't get it. We create our own reality. That was Karl Rove in George W.'s administration. We create our own reality.
Yeah, I do remember that quote, and how did that work out for the country? By the way, I don't think it worked out for our nation all that well. I don't think it worked out for Iraq all that well.
Well, their reality was that,
well.
yeah. Look at that, amazing.
The people who are stating that Donald Trump is doing a good job, is fit to be president, is honest. I'm sure some people are just genuinely, true believers, because sometimes if you wrap your identity up in something, you just mentally commit to it, and you're going to see it through to the bitter end. If you've identified yourself as being a quote deplorable unquote, how do you back out of that? But a lot of the others are just make believe in defense of, as you said, as the board members of CBS said, they don't care. They're just going to believe it's not a real thing because it's their man, it's their leader.
It's like a kid. It's like a little kid who, closes his eyes and puts his hands over his ears and says, I can't hear you. I can't, it's no different than that. And what's so stunning about it is that these are adults. These are sentient beings, and they're in positions of extraordinary power. And the rest of us are doomed as a result.
The whole thing with DeSantis, who, by the way, he's like 10 years younger than I am. Okay? I never heard the phrase monkey up before.
I don't think anybody ever did.
People of my generation almost never even say monkeying around, or
Yeah.
what would be another one? I guess like monkey wrench something was kind of in use in the 90s. But again, I was, my recreation is I'll, sometimes go to a bookstore and just, because I'm an avid reader, and I'll get overpriced coffee and I'll sit there and read for a little while. And, there were like a group of older people, white people, of course, a table across from me, and this was shortly after it happened, and they were talking about how, well, that's just a common phrase, these, the liberal media, they try to make a racial issue. I'm like, a common phrase?
It's not a common phrase. It's not. No one's ever heard of it. You can't find it in any.
Phrase.
No,
Nobody's
it's
ever
not.
Heard of it.
No. It's you had to put monkey into something to say black. That's all. Hey, you know what? I gotta run. I'm getting a buzz. I'm hearing. I'm. Your call to me is driving me crazy. But I mean, not the
Maybe
content.
I'm giving you a headache. I'm sorry.
No, not the content. I got a big buzz in my ear. So thank you. Bye. Oh, please. Well, there. The buzz is gone now. I have a email from somebody saying that to her, I don't think she's hearing the buzz. I'm hearing the buzz. It's driving me nuts. Okay. At least I'm glad you guys aren't. Okay, that's good to know. But you cannot imagine. I mean, I was hearing him through a sound of, a wall of bzzz. So, okay. Maybe by next year we'll have this figured out. What did I want to... Mark writes... Like you, I'm a baby boomer. My high school football coach would have the team come over to his house on Saturdays and watch the film of the game from the previous Friday night. One day after we'd gone over the film and had been berated for all we had done wrong, he said, "Boys, just remember this. A hard cock has no conscience." What the hell does that have to do with what? Huh? I mean... I can't disagree with what the coach said, but why would he say that? Oh, jeez. Mark writes, we all just nodded our heads and continued our lives just as we had before. It's not fair, but you girls are stuck with being the adults. It's been this way for a while. Yeah, it's been this way forever. But I gotta tell you, the girls are getting to a point where a pretty big percentage of them now can't take it anymore. Won't take it anymore. I mean, really. It's just like I think a lot of black people are saying, welcome to our life. We're all seeing now, you're a black person sitting in your own apartment, a cop comes in and shoots you dead. You're standing there doing nothing, you get shot dead. We're all starting to now understand the reality of what it is to be black in America, especially a black man. But actually, black women not only get the woman crap, but they get the black crap too. So me now feeling such rage at the just in the bone misogyny that impacts the life of women in this world. Guys, there's no way you'll ever understand it, really. The better men will be able, because they're sensitive or empathetic, will be able to maybe But you can't understand what it is to live in a world in which you have to take this shit just because of your gender or your skin color. If you're a white male, you don't know that. And it's a constant. And yet, women are told we have to be the adults. Suck it up, right? Black people are told, we had a black president, and he was told never appear to be angry. Angry black men scare white people. And so it didn't even matter that not only wasn't he an angry black man, he was this dignified man, this erudite man, this good man, good father, good husband. You could all see all that. And the reaction of the white population was to take refuge in Donald Trump. So freaked out were they by having a black man in a position over them. Speaking of men, so the Pope is now calling an extraordinary, never before in the recent past ever, first time according to this account, that all the presidents of all the bishops' conferences all over the globe have been summoned for a meeting on one subject. And that subject, of course, is how these men treat those who are subservient to them. How they treat those over whom they have great power. I ain't holding my breath for anything to come out of this. So after decades of essential denial from the Vatican, this now is, I guess we finally got the Vatican's attention, that this is a global, church-wide problem. But it's global. It ain't just this church, guys. And the New York Times piece on it, and I'm grateful, this is good reporting, reminded us that when the clergy abuse scandal first broke, it broke here in the United States. And that was in the mid-1980s. And the Vatican at that time essentially dealt with it by saying that it was obviously something wrong in America, because it was just there. And oops, then when it sort of popped up in Canada and Ireland, in England, Australia, the church then framed it as obviously a kind of problem in the English-speaking countries. I mean, the Vatican's reluctance to acknowledge the reality, the scope of this problem was just amazing. And and we're back to a kid with his eyes shut and his hands over his ears. I can't hear you, I don't see it, I can't hear you. Right? Same thing. And then the scandal erupted in Germany, in Belgium, in France, in Austria. And this is around 2010, and it's Pope Benedict. And you know what he said? Benedict at the time termed it a problem with the developed world, born of the sexual libertinism in Europe and the developed world. But now, finally, they're saying, I need all the bishops from all over the world here. We got to deal with this. And my guess is mumbo jumbo, mumbo jumbo, mumbo jumbo. Nothing will change. That's my guess. Because that's what happens when powerful men realize that, we got to appear that we're doing something about this. We got to try to do so. We'll appoint a committee. I mean, that's sort of where this is now, right? And, wow, extraordinary urgency being felt because this meeting isn't until February. Power corrupts. White people have had power. And men have had power. And they've been corrupted for centuries, millennia. And the people who have borne the brunt of their power, be they racial minorities, religious minorities, or women, are, I think, reaching a point where enough. I'll tell you, this woman has. All right, guys, that's it. Sorry the world's such a fucking mess. And sorry, well, I'm glad that apparently you guys can hear. We'll deal. It doesn't matter any blah blah blah. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.